Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the HBA Sales and Marketing Council Entrepreneurial Mindset from surviving to thriving with Jung Park. Many of you have seen Jung in the past, and we're very excited to have him back today. We went through his slide presentation last week, and you guys will be ecstatic. What he has to share with you today will be phenomenal. So thank you for your time. Before we get started, we always like to thank our sponsors. Anchor Engineering is our event sponsor today. Fantastic structural engineers, Eric and his team. If you are ever looking for some top-notch engineering, they are the ones to go to. And then, of course, our overall sponsor, Ferguson BAC, Colton Mortgage, and Wells Fargo Home Mortgage. Thank you all for helping us with this event today. One of the things I wanted to share real quick, we came up with a fantastic program called Monday Fundamentals, if you will. And you'll see by the calendar in front of you, every Monday, the 24th, the 28th, the 26th, and the 9th, there will be a 1-hour presentation on from home sales to not being out negotiated, psychometric selling, just some fantastic programs to keep you guys on your game today. So please take note of this. We'll also have this posted on the HBA's website, but fantastic, quick 1-hour learn, and that was our goal. So I want to introduce Jung Park. I've known Jung for quite some time, and he is, I can't say enough about him. You know, you're talking about surviving to thriving, and Jung is a perfect model of surviving to thriving, being born in Seoul, Korea, moving to New York when he was 13 years of age, living around the Queens and the Brooklyn area, and everything he has done, he's been successful at. He teaches at DU. He also is an advisory board member at Jake Jabb Center for Entrepreneurship at UC Denver as well. And Jung just released a new book. It's The Life of ROI. And if you guys remember last year, he presented The Life of ROI and what do we get for our return investment as people, right? We always want ROI in business, but we always forget you got to take care of number one before you can take care of the rest. So we will be giving away one of his books at the end of the program today. We'll have a little trivia for you. So be aware, you have to be on to win. So if you ditch, you can't win. So anyway, Jung, I'm so excited to see you, and I'll let you take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Philip. Thanks for having me, guys. Bright early, first thing in the morning, and the first day of the week. I appreciate you spending your Monday morning with us today. I hope I will be able to add some value to the upcoming week. Here we go. Allow me a couple of seconds so I can share this screen. I hope you guys can see the screen okay. Yes? Okay, fantastic. Just so that you guys don't get sick of me talking for the next 60 minutes, I've asked Erin to help me. I volunteered her sort of to help me read some of the slides. So as we go through the slide deck that I prepared for you today, I'll be seeking Erin's help. So thank you, Erin, in advance. I'd like to start with just a quick intro of myself, why this person is talking to you Monday morning, in case I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you. As Philip mentioned, I am an entrepreneur by trade. I do teach at CU Denver. I've been teaching for about 9 years now. I teach for the professional MBA program, 1-year MBA program, and the executive MBA program. My start to the entrepreneurial journey started when I was an MBA student at CU Denver. I competed in a silly little business plan competition that changed the trajectory of my career. After winning the competition, I decided to actually start the business back in 2005. I've spent about 11 years running the business, and I've started a couple of different ones since then, and I'm still on my own. I'm a strategist by nature. Strategic consulting is my background. And as you can see today, I actually yap for a living as well. And now I yap online on Zoom. And as Philip mentioned, I wrote my very first book. It actually came out of the last 8, 9 years of teaching, but it really, I had the drive to finish it during quarantine. So the time off has actually really helped me focus on finishing the book. But more importantly, I'm a father of 2 beautiful, quirky, smart as kids. I wonder where they got their defective genes from. And I'm a husband to Alexis, my wife of 26 years. We just celebrated our 26-year anniversary last Friday. So a very patient woman. God bless her. And I'm a son, oldest and the only son to my mother. My father has passed a few years ago. And I'm a brother to a hardcore New Yorker who refuses to leave New York. But I still have my hopes up that she will join us at some point here in beautiful Colorado. Now, what I am is a little bit more complicated, and hopefully this will explain some of the speech impediment that you will hear throughout this presentation here. I identify as Asian by race, and I'm an American. If you look at my passport, so I'm legally an American citizen, but culturally, I'm a Korean New Yorker. I spent the first 13 years of my life in Korea, so I bring and still hold to some of the cultural artifacts of my motherland, and yet I grew up in New Yorker as a New Yorker. So it's been a bit of a shit show as a human being, combining these 2 very opposing and contradictory cultural artifacts at times. I've been calling Denver or Colorado home since 2000, and I don't think I'm going anywhere else, as I'm perfectly happy here. And also my wife is a native, and she threatened to leave me if I ever try to take us out of Colorado again. A few years ago at CU Denver, we had some Fortune 500 companies ask us, specifically to the Jake Jeff Center for Entrepreneurship, to see if we can come up with a methodology or framework to teach their employees how to think more entrepreneurially. At first, most of us laughed at it and said, well, it just can't be taught. But then when we were really challenged to think about what we go through as entrepreneurs, all the shit show that happens in our head, there was a reason and a rhyme to it. It was an organized chaos. It wasn't just a bunch of shiny things running into each other and running in all the different directions. So when I really started to put the framework together as to how we think and why we do the things that we do, few things really popped up as to the things that most entrepreneurs do really well. And when we put all these shiny things together and make sense of it, we can start to think about how these things come into play, not only as an entrepreneur, but as a professional or even a person leading their personal lives, doing things the way they want to intentionally. So the framework that came out of this painful exercise that we've gone through was the 6 components that I was able to draw from the things that I've done in the last 20 plus years, thinking like an entrepreneur and acting like an entrepreneur. We won't go through all 6 of them today, as we are limited with time. And also, when Philip and I talked originally about this particular session, Philip really wanted me to focus on what it means to be in a time in our history where we are collectively, whether that's locally, personally, nationally, or globally, where we're suffering and going through something that we've never have gone through before. So I wanted to take components out of the entrepreneurial mindset framework that really resonates and may apply to what we're going through in current times. So these are the 3 things that I've selected to share with you guys today. The 3 components of entrepreneurial mindset that I really think may be beneficial for us to get through the next 6 months, year, whenever this may be, the pandemic will be over, so that we can get through surviving what we were forced to survive, but figuring out ways to find opportunities to thrive in these challenging times. The first component is really identifying the problems. This sounds really simple, and you may say, well, that sounds really simple and easy. Why do we need to spend time on it? Because finding out exactly what the problem is not as easy as some people may think, because there's no shortage of challenges or problems that we have to face, not as only as an entrepreneur, but just human beings, especially in these times. But identifying and recognizing the problems and challenges is not enough. We need to figure out how to cluster them so that different problems that actually have similar traits are grouped together. So once we go through finding reasoning or something that beyond the symptomatic evidences that binds these problems together, what we come up with is actually clusters of problems that we see, grouping of problems that may be driven by sales, that may be driven by HR, that may be driven by project management. And once we come up with those clusters or groups of problems, then we can start identifying and figuring out what the root cause is. Because if you don't find the root cause of these problems, forever you're chasing the one-offs. You think every problem is a brand new one, and you dedicate resources and time to try to solve that problem, when in fact it has happened before, and you just haven't dealt with the root cause. So one of the things that entrepreneurs do really well is not just pay attention to the symptomatic evidences of problems that we face, but really finding out why is this happening, especially if it happened more than once. And we try to get to the root cause so we can fix it for good. Because most entrepreneurs, especially the startup founders, we simply don't have the time, the resources, and the money to keep making the same mistakes over and over, hoping that it somehow works out. We got a couple of takes at really figuring out the problem and solving it all at once so that we don't ever have to deal with the problem again. The next part is really understanding the three components of the risk or the problems and challenges that we face. There are problems where the solutions are known because someone else has done it or you've done it. So the marketing problems or logistics problems that you're facing, there are solutions available. You just got to find the right sources for that, whether it is an online source, a book or a class or a person who's gone through that. And there are things that you simply don't know. These are unknown factors that you either haven't gotten to, or you haven't sorted out, or it just hasn't been figured out yet. But it's knowable. These are problems that you can solve. The solutions are workable. Somebody hasn't done it yet. So there are unknowns at the moment. And then there's a third part, which is unknowable. These are things that can keep you up at night and drive you up the walls. But at the end of the day, these are unknowables. Will there ever be peace in the world? We don't know. If it happens within our lifetime, then it would be known, but it's not something you yourself can go out there and find the answers to, unfortunately. So by dissecting what these components are when we face problems and challenges, it really helps us to sort matters into these buckets to say, if it's unknowable, then I'm not going to lose sleep over it, because losing sleep over it ain't going to do nothing anyway. You can stress out about it, but they're unknowables. Now, if they're unknowns, then the challenge is, can you actually do something, either by reading books, creating your own solution, talking to people, going through a collaborative process to take the unknowns into the knowns? What are the things that you can do to take unknowns at the current moment and turn them into knowns? And what are the tactics and the tasks and deliverables you're going to create to make that happen? So by realizing that not all problems and challenges may be able to be solved by you or by others, I'm hoping that it unburdens your shoulders of the stress, and then allowing you and encouraging you to really focus on taking the unknowns into the knowns. The next part is understanding whether these problems are internally caused and externally caused, and how much you have control over these things. If they're externally caused and they're unknowables, or if they're externally caused and there's nothing you can do about it, just as the pandemic that's been going on, we have zero control over that. So what we can do is focus on what control we do have over these problems and challenges that we face, and not worry about all the things that you have zero control over, so that you can maximize the things that you have access to and that you have control over. So you can actually create the outcomes that may serve you some benefits. There is no shortage of pressure and stress that we're facing today. There's global pandemic going on that's affecting us on a global scale, as well as nationally and locally, and even within your own household. I'm thankful that none of my family members have passed away from Corona, but I certainly know friends of the family and friends' families that have dealt with such tragic outcomes. So on a global level to the personal level, there's no shortage of pressure and stress that we're facing today. And it can easily overwhelm you, especially if you turn on the news, whether it's local news or national news. So then what can we do? We can focus on what we have control over, the sphere of influences that we have over the people we love and care for, the things that we can do every day, given that we have access to 24 hours in a day, that we can do something that is proactive and positive for those around us. So on a personal level, what can you do? What do you have access to and control over? And then in a bigger picture, I think once we sort out our personal manners and have control over individually what we can do within our own spheres influences with the things that we have access to, I truly believe that then we can start affecting our local community, and through collaboration and partnership, maybe we can take that up to national level or even global. But none of that global, national, local level can happen if you don't have control over what's happening in your world individually. So let's really focus on what it is that we can do in these times of pandemic. And obviously there's a divisive nature to what we're dealing with in our culture. With the election coming up in November, there is no shortage of challenges and stress we're facing. So let's really keep a clear focus on what it is that we're doing today. Second part is critical thinking. Most people think critical thinking is a singular activity, but it really isn't. It really breaks down to three different components of thinking that makes up what we typically refer to as critical thinking. People think about the creative thinking part, where you're coming up with all these fancy ideas and brainstorming, really exciting, and then go right to executing, which is the analytical thinking. And if the execution doesn't work, people go right back to creative thinking and say the strategy was wrong. Most people skip the strategic thinking part that actually binds the creative thinking and analytical thinking. And I've also taken the liberty of fusing the components within each of these elements that I think applies to what we're going through today. So in the creative thinking part, during pandemics, during crisis, there's still room left open for ideas and innovations to come through. So while we are surviving and dealing with the day-to-day, especially for those of your parents out there, I know what you're going through with school year coming up and having to make the serious decision of whether you're going to send your kids back to school in person or teaching them online, and all the consequences that come with either decisions. What are the ways that we can be brainstorming on things that we can make better? And using the typical brainstorming exercises, what if resources wasn't a limitation? What if we had all the control in the world? What if I was the president tomorrow? What things would I change? What things would look different? And visualizing what they may look like in your head so you can actually own this. Erin, would you mind helping us out with this short quote, please?
Absolutely. In the midst of chaos, there is also opportunity.
The famous author who wrote the book of Art of War years ago, even back then, they saw in times of crisis, there's always an opportunity. And this is one of the stories I'd like to share with you. During Spanish Civil War back in 1930s, a young entrepreneur from America who's had some disagreements with his father, taking over the family business, decided to go abroad to England. And while he was in England, he saw these volunteer British fighters, soldiers, who actually volunteered to go fight on behalf of the democratic group fighting against the Germans and the Communist Party in Spain to support the democracy in Spain. And one thing he noticed was that these volunteer British fighters were given these little sacks. But inside of these sacks were hard, sugar-coated chocolates. So being the entrepreneur, being the curious entrepreneur that he asked, why are you sending these with the soldiers? And they said, well, chocolate has many benefits in the battlefield. As you know, it creates endorphins in your brain, and wouldn't want a little piece of heaven from back home while you're fighting the enemies in the battlefield. So it was ways to get the British soldiers a peace of mind, a time to unwind and have a little taste of back home. So he asked why it was coated with this sugar substance, and they said, well, chocolates melt, and especially if the soldiers are holding the chocolates in the hand, it would actually melt in their hand. So by coating it with this sugar, hard coated sugar outer shell, that it would keep the chocolate from melting, so that soldiers can actually enjoy it in the battlefield when they're fighting. Well, this entrepreneur saw that opportunity and came back to America a few years later and started pushing out this product that we know today as M&M. And the young entrepreneur was Mr. Forrest Mars, who saw the opportunity in the worst times that people would face in times of war, of how the little bits of candies that was packed in these little sacks to bring joy for the soldiers could have a greater impact to Americans back home. So M&M start really came from volunteer British soldiers marching off to fight democracy in Spain. Who would have thunk that? But opportunities do exist in times of crisis like this. In 1665, there was a great plague of London. Many people died. About 100,000 people died from this plague, and that's 25% of London in 18 months. Now, that's 25% of the population, not 25% of those who were tested. So let's get that straight. So obviously, in short time of 18 months, many people have died from this plague. And they actually did something very similar to what we're doing today, because businesses shut down, obviously, and schools shut down to send everybody back home because this plague was killing everyone. And this young college student named Isaac, who was studying at Trinity College in London, and actually Cambridge, was also sent home. And unfortunately for Isaac, there were no such thing as remote learning back then. So all he had was his backyard, his house, and alone with his thoughts. And that's all he had. So Isaac put his curious mind to practice, and he spent many days and nights and weeks and months in his backyard thinking about things that he never had the chance of thinking about, or diving into the depth of thinking that he didn't have a chance to with all the distraction and noise that was going on his campus life. And this brilliant man is known for his innovations, many of them, which one came from his backyard watching an apple fall from a tree while in quarantine. And obviously that's what we know as a law of gravity that Sir Isaac Newton discovered. And in these times of quarantine and limitations, it wasn't something that held him back. He actually thought that these were his wonder years where he was the most productive and innovative in his time of career. And then this man lived until he was 84. So it's not like he lived a short life and this was the highlight. He lived a very long, productive life. And he specifically chosen and called these 2 years that he spent in quarantine to be the wonder years because he got most work done. Being isolated and being focused on what it is that he wanted to create. Erin, would you mind reading Isaac's quote here?
Absolutely. For in those days, I was in the prime of my age for invention and minded mathematics and philosophy for more than at any time since.
So I think there are opportunities here while we are locked down in our houses and having the time away from the typical day-to-day hustle and bustle that we're faced with. So how would we go about taking advantage of the times that we do have in this not chosen isolation, but isolation nonetheless? So one of the things that we can think about in these times of crisis is what's missing. There's a lot of things happening that's changing the way we do things. So what's missing? If there's a demand such as this Zoom, such as webinars and different things that are happening, obviously the tech companies are jumping on board to provide ways and means for people to connect online. So what's missing in current times of crisis that just hasn't been met yet based on the demand that we're seeing. So in your line of work, I know that the real estate agents have really embraced as of late the virtual walkthrough of the house. I knew that technology was available before, but certainly now it's more critical than ever to be able to bring that potential buyer into the house when visiting houses in person may not be as easy as it used to be. So what are the things that are missing in your line of work that hasn't been invented or that hasn't been perfected? And based on how you've been doing things, is there a better way of doing things than how you've done it in the past? I know many people are looking forward to going back to the norm, but I think we have to ask the question, was the norm, the way we used to do things, really the best way of doing things? Or were we simply used to doing the things that we were used to simply because that's all we had available to us? So in CU Denver, many of us fought against teaching online, myself included, because I never thought that we can replace a handshake, being in a classroom together, watching the body language and working through as human beings locked up in the same room. And I was dreadfully wrong, because for the last 2 semesters, starting in May, I had to teach online using Zoom. And there are tools available to not make the online classroom environment the same as in-person classroom. Nothing's ever going to replace 2 human beings or group of human beings coming together and sharing. That won't be replaced forever. It won't. However, it can be done in a different way. And I found that using the tools, and it took some elbow grease to figure out how to translate the in-person learning onto the online environment to be just as meaningful and relevant and intimate. And there are ways to make that happen. So opportunities do exist. We just simply haven't been forced to look at it through those lenses yet. So is there a better way of doing things the way we've been doing it? And what are the opportunities that haven't been undiscovered yet? And what would the new way look like? You know, I never thought I'll be sitting in the basement of my house wearing a shirt, but wearing my shorts underneath it, with a light set up in front of me, with 2 screens in a corner of my basement where I'm doing my work as a professional. This is not something that I've been trained on. This is not something I imagine in my wildest dreams. However, now that I'm doing that and I see the possibility, what would this look like 10 years from now? Would I ever have to leave the house if I don't want to? Can I still be productive and find new ways of doing things, or find new ways of doing the same things and still be productive? So what it would look like, I think visualization, for those of us who are visual, can really help us find answers and find those first few steps to get through. On a personal level, I know I've said many a times all these 3 things and more. I wish I could do that. I wish I could play more with my kids. I wish I could have dinner with my family every night. I wish, because there was never enough time. There's always something that was urgent. There was always a call that I had to take, an event that I had to go to, a networking, teaching, whatever it was. I had reasons why I couldn't do things. Well, now that we've been quarantined for the past, we're going on 5 months already here, 6 months. Almost every night, my family and I are sitting down having dinner together. And when I'm working down here in the basement, my son comes down and wants to play. He's 8 years old. He just wants to play. So we have a foosball set up, we set up so that I'll take the time off and actually play with him for a half an hour, and squeeze those things in. So what are the things that you wish you could have done while you're busy working in person, where now you have the opportunity to actually do some and enjoy some of these beautiful things that comes with life that we never had access to or didn't have access to? The second part of critical thinking is strategic thinking. And this is where, when you have great ideas, you can't do this alone. You need collaboration and you need support, you need partners. So what are the alliances and partnership you need? Who are the people that you need to get things done? How do you get them on your side? How do you create these brand ambassadors? How do you create these supporters? Who knows what you know so that you can actually do this without failing or failing less? And those are the questions that we should be asking ourselves once we do have an idea. Who knows what I want to know in the field that I want to get into, or the idea that I want to execute? Expertise that you simply may not have. Who has that expertise? And who's done this? I don't think there's ever a thing that's brand new. Every now and then you find those things like iPods and iPads and all those things that happen. But majority of the things that entrepreneurs come up with, we're simply trying to figure out a better way of doing things, which means the components of what we want to do, someone's already done it. So who do I need to get to know to learn from them as to what I need to know to pursue this new idea that I want to execute? And you need supporters, you need ambassadors. Obviously, I'm surrounded by supporters here in HBA, starting with Philip, who I've known for a long time, Barb, Erin, and Connie. There has to be the tribe around you to help you get to where you need to go. And there are good people out there that you know of in your network. So how do you get their support in a meaningful way? On a personal level, who inspires you? Who are those people, rather than sucking energy from you, who actually give you energy? People that are synergistic with you in your thinking and your feeling and your thoughts and your philosophy that you can share and withdraw some energy from. Or simply people who are going through the same thing that you're going through. Who are the friendly shoulders that you can rest your head on and simply bitch and whine and cry about things that are happening, and make sure that those people aren't the ones that are judging you for you practicing your vulnerability, but be there to support you and guide you through this. And what relationship do you want to continue to invest or nurture? Back in the days before the quarantine, I've took on many coffee meetings, many calls, many introduction meetings as I could. And I wasn't really turning down anyone because everything was an opportunity. Every person was an opportunity. But in these times of quarantine, it really forced me to think about how little time we really do have and where I want to spend and invest my time in and with whom I want to spend that time with. So it kills me when I'm sitting down here working or on a call and my son comes down, wants to play, and I have to tell him to go upstairs because I can right now. Before, when we left the house early in the morning and came back late at night, that division of work and life was distinct. You worked during the day, 8 to 10 hours a day. You didn't have to necessarily worry about playing with your children because you almost had a pass not to think about that. But now that we're working out of our houses, that line between work and life is blurred because we're doing it in the same environment. And it kills me to tell my son that I can't play with him because I got to work. So I am a lot more selective as to who I meet with now virtually, what kind of calls that I'm taking. And as silly as even taking calls or taking meetings in a Zoom environment or this online environment, because there are those people, I'll take a call so I don't have to worry about washing my face or doing my hair or changing my clothes. Then there are those people I actually do want to invest the time to iron my shirt, wash my face, and sit in front of a computer and engage with that person face to face because they mean so much to me. So I think in these times of quarantine, it does allow us an opportunity to really look at our network and people we surround ourselves with and really make the determination who deserves our time, who deserves our vulnerability, who deserves our most valuable asset, which is the time. And how we can go about intentionally nurturing those relationships and staying away from those that just suck the life out of you. You know these people. They only call you when they break up with somebody, or they only call you when they got fired and they need your help finding a new job, or they need a ride from the airport, or they need you to help them move. You know who they are. And during when they don't need you, you never hear from them. Let's really figure out in these times who deserve to be in your life and why. The last part is analytical thinking. This is an easy thing that most people are used to and familiar with. Coming with tasks, figuring out what the deliverables are, and creating a short-term plan how to get these things done. One of the things that we do forget sometimes is how these short, midterm, and long-term tactical plans needs to be aligned. So you're not going off on tangents and circling around when this needs to be on a linear path. Failures and tangents will happen. But if you don't have an alignment between short-term and a long-term, then we lose sight of what it is that we're going. And oftentimes we throw out the baby with the bathwater when we just throw out the vision and the goals and the strategy because the short-term tactics didn't work. So we have to keep an eye on what we're doing today and next 6 months actually are aligned with what we want to see and create in 3 years from now, and how that may align with the 10-year goal of 20. That is the long-term goal, so that we can focus our efforts and make sure that our efforts and resources are not wasted. The last part I would like to share with you is these 3 components: learning, reflection, and refinement of the entrepreneurial mindset framework. My grandfather a long time ago taught me that you have 2 eyes and 2 ears and 1 mouth. And he said, as long as you use them proportionately, that I was going to be okay. What he was really talking about was the Pareto's principle of 80-20. And obviously he didn't know what that was, and neither did I at the time. But it's true. Universally, there is this truth about 80-20, and especially what my grandfather taught me about watching, observing, and listening versus talking. I'm yapping at you today, so I'm learning very little because we don't have a dialogue. But the only true way to learn is to watch and listen, whether it's on a personal level or professional level. So when we watch and listen, we start gathering data points about people, about actions, about happenings, decisions, to start making some patterns that make sense to us. And this is what I mean. Erin, would you mind?
Yes. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. Steve Jobs.
Very brilliant man for many reasons. But I have to disagree with the second half of his statement. For someone who's a control freak, someone who's a perfectionist, I have a hard time understanding why he would leave connecting the dots in the future to trust, somehow wishing and hoping that those dots will magically connect. I think we have control over this. And here's, I think, how I think we can control over how we connect the dots moving forward, not only backwards, but moving forward. Hyper-consciousness is something that I've been practicing for years. A good friend of mine at the time told me about this practice. It just basically means being super, super aware and conscious about everything that's going around you and everything that you're doing, okay? So I practiced it enough where I'm doing this minute by minute now, and syllable by syllable, and sentence by sentence, and word by word. I can't see you right now, but when I teach and when I do other engagements, I have 2 screens set up. So I have my slide deck on one, and I have the gallery view of everyone that I'm speaking with on one screen, and I'm watching their body language and facial expressions. Now, I used to do this in person as well. And in person, there's distractions, and there's noise, there are all kinds of movements going on. So I think the level of hyper consciousness I was practicing was actually lower than the level of hyper consciousness that I can practice today through the invention of Zoom, because oftentimes I found people are very comfortable in their own environment, wearing their pajama bottoms or shorts like I am. And they're not always thinking about whether the person on the other side of the screen is looking at me. So they're much more free with their facial expressions and body language. And I'm watching them, and I'm seeing who doesn't get it, who disagrees with it, but will never say anything, who finds it interesting, who's laughing at it. So I can gauge in real time what the impact is that I'm having through my words and through my spiel. So practicing hyperconsciousness allows me in real time to pivot. If I'm losing half of the crowd, I got to change something immediately to get them back. If I'm putting people to sleep, if I'm actually hitting it out of the park with certain jokes and certain points that I'm making, then I need to make sure that I keep them there and I don't lose them. So it allows me to be keen on everything that's happening around me and the impact I might have, both positive and negative. And it allows me in real time to pivot and change the course so that I can be more proactive and positive, and certainly have more effective outcomes. So when we do this in a long term, looking backwards, most of us have been fired. Most of us have been dumped. Most of us had someone we love pass away. Most of us had something happen in our lives that really took us off course to a point where we just didn't have the energy or the strength to get up the next morning. But we survived. We got through it. You've conquered your personal trauma, your personal challenges along the way. Human beings as a species, we've also been very resilient, overcoming many challenges like the plagues of 1665 and many things that we survived here in the modern history as well, with SARS and AIDS. We had epidemics, we had pandemics, we survived them. We are resilient. So by looking backwards and reflecting backwards of what we've been, individually and collectively, we have to acknowledge that we are resilient human beings. Data will show us that, not some schmuck who's trying to fluff things up to go rah, rah, rah and sing kumbaya Monday morning to say everything's going to be okay. Everything may not be okay. Things don't get easier, but we get tougher and we get smarter because data and the patterns of our history have shown us that, both as a human being, but also on a personal level. So when we acknowledge this pattern that we've been on, this historical pattern, then we can move forward with confidence. Then we can start outlining where we want to go and why. And what are all the things that we may face consequences-wise, and we walk towards that with eyes wide open. Entrepreneurs aren't stupid. We're not risk takers. We are risk identifiers, risk assessors, and risk mitigators. We're very good at that. We're scared as anyone else, but the confidence that you see in us, some of us, I mean, there are douchebags who are completely ego-driven, but for most of us who are entrepreneurs, we don't push ahead with confidence because we're cocky. We push ahead with confidence because we know where we've been. And we also have done our homework, identifying, assessing, and mitigating the risks that we foresee. And we all know life is not about one gradual climb to a happy plateau where we live happily forever. Life is about ups and downs. And right now we're about where the red arrow is. We're in the pits, we're in the valley. But soon enough, we're going to be climbing that back up and getting ourselves out of this. And the yellow arrow where that is. And sometimes we will be on the decline again. And we've certainly have been on the top as well. Life is organic. Life evolves. It never stays the same. We will be okay. History has shown us that. Erin, last one.
Do what you can with what you have where you are. Theodore Roosevelt.
Our 26th president has said this back in the times of crisis during his presidency. And it's true today. You could only do what you can with what you have where you are. We can jump ahead. We can skip ahead. There's no such thing in life. We'll get through it. But let's focus on what we do have, what we can do, where we are, so we don't unnecessarily burden ourselves with setting the goals too high, setting our aspirations too high, therefore putting all the pressure on us on things that may take years to develop and accomplish. Let's focus on what we can do where we are today. So the professional questions that I would love to leave you with, that I would love for you to think about, is figuring out what do you have control over? And don't worry about things that you have zero control over because you can't change anything anyway. So within your control, what are the things you can do? Just like Theodore Roosevelt said, right? What do you have access to? What do you got right now? And what can you do with that? And actions. Entrepreneurs aren't this aspirational, creative thinking people that sit in the back room always thinking about new ideas. Those are entrepreneurs, not entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs do brainstorming and are creative, but we're also very good at figuring out tactically what's the first thing we need to do to get there. So what will you do starting today or tomorrow with what you have in control? And what do you need to start? And who do you need to talk to get things started? Or whose support you need to get things started? And figuring out all three components of the critical thinking here: the brainstorming, the creative idea, the strategic alliances that you need, the people that you need, but being able to visualize what it is that you want to accomplish. On a personal level, what is it that you want and need? I think for most of us, we may have what we need since we have the privilege of being on Zoom on a Monday morning from our home offices or similar. So we have it better than others. So if we have the needs that we need, if we have the needs accomplished, then what is it that you want to accomplish? And what would you do as your first step to get there? And what I'm talking about here isn't self-care of being pampered. I'm talking about self-development on a functional level as well as emotional level. How would you go about taking this time to actually work on yourself? What are the self-development areas that you want to focus on that you never had time for before? And who makes me happy? You know, as I said, when my 8-year-old comes down here, yes, at times I'm annoyed because I get work done, but ultimately he makes me laugh and he makes me happy. And I know in return, I make him happy and I make my wife happy and my daughter and my mother. So who are the people that bring joy to your life? And what are the opportunities that you have to bring joy in someone else's life? Because some would argue that by bringing joy to others, you actually reach a level of happiness that you will not be able to by yourself for yourself. That's what I had prepared for you today. And I don't wish you some empty promise of everything is going to be okay. It's going to be tough. It is tough. But just know that historically, you've gone through it on an individual level, and we've gone through it collectively as human beings. We will get through this, but it takes some intentional practice of these things. So I wish you a good journey, and I would like to invite you to embrace some of the concepts that we talked about and putting some of those into practice starting today or tomorrow. Thank you.
Fantastic, Jung. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. We could all sit back and just watch it happen. And like you said, those are the ones that don't get it done. And if you be creative, come up with new ideas, it will be a better place. And we may not be the new norm, will be the better norm. So
Absolutely.
great presentation. So we'll be giving our book away in a second here. If anybody has any questions, please just go into the chat. Aaron and I are keeping an eye on that. But I wanted to share my last screen. Thank you. All right, we wanted to thank our sponsors again. So thank you again for our sponsors, Anchor, Ferguson BAC, Colton Mortgage, Wells Fargo Home Mortgage. Truly appreciate your support. So the information on that calendar we will have available for you, hbadenver.com, SMC_Facebook. It is a private Facebook for all Denver SMC members. So this is only for your eyes only. So thank you again for joining us. Now, I have a trivia question. And the first one who guesses this will win Jung's latest book release, The Return of ROI. So here's the question. Because it's been so hot out, and we're all complaining about how hot it is, I wanted to ask, on a long-term basis, Denver averages how many 100 days per year? How many 100 degrees day per year does Denver, where's my chat? Where is it?
Oh, we have one winner so far.
Oh, we have a winner.
Kelly Clark.
Kelly Clark. Kelly, 1 is the correct answer. So when we are all sitting around saying it's so hot, only 1 day a year is 100 degrees in Colorado, in Denver, Colorado. Be blessed that we are here for sure. And yes, do not take your wife out of the state, Jung. Uh, she will not forgive you for that. I'll tell you that. So let's see. Do we have any questions?
First one from Barb. What are the opportunities you are seeing in the business world during this pandemic?
I think the biggest one is how people are spending their time. I think most of us have experienced ineffective meetings where you simply show up to a meeting because you're supposed to, and then you waste a whole lot of time talking about all kinds of crap and go on tangents and then not getting any work done. But I think in these times, now that we are getting some in-person meetings going again, I think people are really critical on how we're spending our time together. So Zoom meetings are great, call meetings are great for certain things, but how do we maximize the time that we actually do have in person, because it is such a rare commodity. So I think overall, in different sectors, I think people are looking at how to maximize the time they have in person and not waste any more time in meaningless meetings that we're used to.
Thank you. Antonio has a question. I love this question. It says, what is the maximum percentage of risk you are comfortable with?
That's a very personal question, and it depends on who you are as a person, obviously. I have friends who are locked up because they took too many chances. So I have people that are way ahead of me in risk tolerance, and I have people behind me that are way risk averse. I'm married to a person who's very risk averse. So I actually put myself on the scale and figure out all the consequences that may happen before I actually mitigate the risk with some potential options. So I would say it's really on a personal. On my end, I took it as far as, because I have two children and I'm a family man, I took it as far as not allowing anything I do on a professional level to actually impact our personal assets. So making sure that there is that corporate shield, that I don't list anything that I own personally, or have anything that's personal assets that has my wife's name on it onto the business side. So I keep my risk completely separate from my personal assets and personal properties that would impact my children. So even when I did file bankruptcy, it was a much more cleaner break because I kept that separate. So every individual has to make that decision. But to me, if you're a family person and you got family that depends on you, you really have to draw that line. So you seek outside funding and you don't go after your own properties, because you just don't know how this ride will end. So I don't know if that answers your question. There isn't a specific number or percentage. It's really based on where you are and what you're risking and how much of that you're willing to risk and how much you think you can remake up.
Oh, Philip, you're on mute.
So Antonio, I think to wrap up that question is, do everything legal so you don't get locked up.
Yes.
We have another question from Troy Arnold over at Wells Fargo, our sponsor. Thanks, Troy. He asked, can you share what opportunities you are currently working on?
So the book is really the outcome of what I've been working on in the last 9 to 10 years. I've certainly gone through my struggles professionally and personally. And from day one, when I started teaching at CU Denver, people asked why I didn't have a book, why I was using other people's book. But I didn't want to write a book for the sake of writing. I really wanted to have something that's of value. So what writing a book has allowed me to pursue from opportunity perspective is looking at the life ROI model of what it is that we're all trying to get out of our lives, not knowing when it's going to end, gives me an opportunity to do some work outside of CU Denver. So I wouldn't necessarily consider it teaching. It would be more of a seminar driven for people of all different ages to really take a critical and strategic look at their lives and build a strategic model and a plan to get what they want out of life. And I don't obviously mean houses and cars and money and job description, but something much more intimate and important to them as individuals. So to me, the opportunity, especially with what's been happening in this pandemic, where over 1,000 people are dying each day here in our country, it really puts the life and how short this is, how fragile this is, really in the front line of our consciousness. So to me, the opportunity is to really pursue the work that I've been wanting to do, but never got my arms around until a couple of years ago. And to me, this is the life work that I want to do for the rest of my life. And unfortunately, this global pandemic has given me the platform and the opportunity to get out there with some relevance that is much at a higher level than it was before. So that's what I'm working on. I'm building an entire suite of services and products around the life ROI model. So I can be a Sherpa on people's journey, hoping that I can guide them through where they want to go.
Fantastic. And I believe we can get the book on Amazon, correct?
Yes, but for Kelly, Philip, if you don't mind getting her address, I'll send the one directly from Amazon.
You betcha. We'll do that. Looks like we got another question. What are the common struggles you are seeing among your clients and students since the pandemic took over our lives?
So this goes back to something I mentioned earlier. This sense of normacy without really questioning what normal was, I think is what people are struggling with. There are a lot of people that want to go back how things used to be and never questioning, was it really good, especially in our education system. The way our education system was before wasn't exactly perfect. So simply rushing back to how things used to be, we're really missing an opportunity to make something better of it. And same thing with work. I still have employers who think butts in seats means productivity. It isn't. We're proving during this pandemic that certain work, not all, but certain work can be done at home and it's just as effective. So to me, what people are struggling with is this internal dilemma of wanting to get back to normal because that's all they knew and the uncertainty is so scary. And yet the certainty that we had wasn't great. It was not. So when we do get back there somehow, it won't be, but if we do, I think people will be genuinely disappointed and let down that things weren't as good as you used to be. I don't know if you guys have gone through this on a personal level, but if you had broken up with someone and months later or weeks later or even years later, you get back with that person somehow, and you were so elated because it's the person you lost, and you finally got them back, only to be disappointed that, whew, this person is not who I thought it was. He or she was, or he was, or they were. And then we simply get disappointed with something we wanted so long, only to realize they weren't great to begin with. You're only missing them because you didn't have them. So I think that's what people are struggling with. They're just looking for certainty. Certainty will be defined, but it is up to us to define the new norm, as Philip said, and we can own that and we can make it better.
Absolutely. Well, folks, it's 10 o'clock on the hour. We truly appreciate your time. Jung, thank you so much. Always enlightening. So excited. We'll definitely have you back next year. And perhaps your second book will be complete by then.
Hey, first one was painful enough as well.
Well, fantastic. Everybody, thank you so much. Have a great sales week. Keep the ball rolling. We are going to get through this, and it's going to be better than ever. So truly appreciate your time. Be well.
Thanks a lot, guys. Take care.